4.
Sorry.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you for the water bottle. Let's do a roll call. Lance, do you want to start? Lance? Here. Matt? Here. Zimmerman? Here. Brian? Here. Laura Beth? Laura Beth is here, but she's online and on mute. I don't know if she can hear us.
Yeah, and if
Record shows Laura Beth is
I could hear earlier, but I can't hear you guys at all now.
Oh,
yeah, if you guys can talk very close to the microphone.
does that hurt? Is that
I can
better?
hear that, yeah.
Yeah, it's like as close as you can to the microphone, otherwise I can't hear.
Okay.
Thank
good
you.
to know. And Jenny's online, a liaison. Excellent. And Paul is absent today. Great. We also have Patricia, the reserve manager here. This meeting. Okay, we finally have a quorum this time, which is awesome. So we're gonna move with us to vote. No. Cinnamon and Harding. Yeah, that one. We're all good. We're gonna move on to approving the minutes. Do I hear a motion? Make a motion to approve the minutes.
That's the last two, right?
It is the last 2 May. It's 172nd. And Barney seconds. All in favor? Aye. All opposed, any opposed? Yeah, excellent. Minutes are approved. We're gonna open it up for public input. Is there any member of the public here? Public comment? Anybody on? Excellent. We're moving through this agenda quickly. We're gonna move on to the first agenda item then, updates. We have an informational item. We do.
Before I provide my updates as the reserve manager, I'd like to actually hand it over to Allie Helms to kick it out for an OMSI video that she participated in, as well as Laura Hartman, who is online, and Veronica. If you can tee that up in just a moment, Allie, do you want to come up and say a few words about this awesome video and the permanent installation at OMSI in Portland?
Yeah.
Yeah, so about a year ago, we were contacted by the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry to participate in making a film. So this is part of a new exhibit. It is the Nancy Stewart, if it's right, natural science is called Climate of Change. So there are 5 videos featured along with a huge exhibit, hands-on touch tanks and all about climate change. It's really great. So our portion was a video in collaboration with the Confederated Tribes of the Goose Umpquags, that is London, as well as the Confederated Tribes of the Silex and the Coco Tribes. And so they were here for a full day last spring, and we did filming throughout the day and into the evening until about 10 o'clock at night. So there were interviews of all the tribe members as well as myself. So the feature story was about the shared interest in restoring the eelgrass. So that's a habitat that is near and dear to all of the tribes for many different purposes, as well as for restoring it. We've seen a lot of declines in that habitat. And so the filmmaker was Julia Cinto Parker, and she has worked globally in Arctic, in Alaska, and done lots of features for climate change. So this was just a really great opportunity. And what you're going to see is the part of that film. So hope you enjoyed it. And you can go to OMSI in person, of course, and see that opening.
My family lived here for thousands of years. Even though I wasn't raised here, my folks sent me back every summer to spend the summers with my grandparents. So I played on the beaches, I dug clams, I paddled up and down all the little streams. So it isn't like home to me here. It is my home. When I was a child, I swam in South Slough. I could see through to the bottom. It was loaded with ducks and geese and heron. I could see salmon jumping as they went up the slough. That I do not see now. I'm hoping that with the efforts of the reserve and all its helpers, that we can bring all that back.
So an estuary is a place where fresh water, the river or a creek, mixes with the ocean, which is salty. And so this mixing place has very unique and dynamic properties. Eelgrass is sometimes called the lungs of the estuary because it is producing a lot of dissolved oxygen that organisms are able to use. Over 30% of the aerial extent of seagrasses is gone, and this is due to climate change.
Eelgrass is a culturally significant species. It not only provides habitat for a lot of the aquatic species, but it's also a great sequester of carbon. And it's so important to the environment for so many different reasons. It's important to protect and enhance that particular species.
It's easy to come to this beautiful place and get the sense that because it's beautiful, everything is as it should be. But unfortunately, we inherit an ecosystem that is out of balance. And in large part, that's because of the absence of one particular animal, the sea otter. By eating the sea urchins, sea otters keep them in check and help our kelp forests thrive.
Sea otters also benefit eelgrass. By eating crabs, they keep other species in balance that might affect eelgrass health.
And so there is sort of an indirect benefit to the eelgrass.
South Slough resides within the heart of my people's ancestral territory. The relationship with the lands and waters has really shaped our cultural lifeways, our languages, our oral histories, and has developed what we term today as our indigenous knowledge. You know, when you live in a place for thousands of years, you start to learn things. And so that's what indigenous people from this area bring to the table when we think about stewardship and coming together as a community.
It is a challenge, but I think through science and tribal collaboration, education, restoration, that people will begin to understand and recognize the value of eelgrass.
So we come out here in the evening to monitor the intertidal eelgrass because the tide's still going out, but the low tide's around 8 o'clock tonight. And then we'll be able to count, monitor, and plant eelgrass.
This place, as well as ourselves, have co-evolved with one another. And so in a time of anthropogenic climate change, we have that responsibility to continue to steward South Slough and the surrounding area. A healthy environment equals healthy people.
I'm just personally really, really glad to see the work that's being done, the efforts of so many different kinds of people who are helping, that we can get the eelgrass back again, and we can bring the sea otter back to the Oregon coast. All that nature that was here before, and make it available for everybody in the future.
Thanks, Sally. And it was just a really great opportunity in Florida Bellford and at the Mark Consult and featured in the film. And just to note, since our last management commission meeting, you might notice our ceilings look a little bit different. These are acoustic panels that will hopefully room's always been a bit echoey. And so this is to help with some noise suppression, so hopefully it won't be as echoey. You hear some noise downstairs, that is our summer camp. They will be here with us for about another half hour, and then they'll be leaving to another location, but that's what that noise is. But the panels above you are pretty special because they're functioning art. We asked all of our travel partners if they would be so kind as to send us a color that would represent their tribe, because we are co-stewarding these lands, and we really wanted to represent it in this space, as we have a lot of our formal meetings here. So the following colors were selected. Teal represents the Confederate tribes of the Slough Indian. Maroon is the Coquel Indian tribe, and then navy blue is the Confederate tribes of the Coos, Lower and Slough Indians. So we requested them to provide us with a small write-up of why these colors were selected by them, and so we're hoping that they are able to provide that, and then we can put that message and display it here in the room to help educate and inform everyone who comes to this beautiful space. And I just want to personally thank Mike Allman and Mateo from Sugar Creek, who did a wonderful job on the installation. So anyway, just wanted to really mention that. It's quite beautiful. As for updates, the NERS funding guidance has not been signed quite yet. But the final fiscal year 2026 allocations were planned and were set. $931,000 is the federal budget, and $399,000 is the match, the state match for this year. Our no operations award was submitted into the system on June 9th. It is not finished being processed yet, but it does look good that it will be processed soon. The goal is we have an anticipated start date now of October 1st with a 90-day pre-award, which is the same as last year. We asked if DSL may fund our operations for the 90-day with the intention of a federal reimbursement on October 1st, and we're granted that exemption from Governor Kozak, which we are extremely grateful for. So it will be the same as last year, so no hiccup in funding. DSL leadership included in their agency request budget for the 2027 to 2029 period for our project manager position to be made permanent, and for our seasonal education position to be converted to a full-time year-round position. It is currently a permanent position, but it's a seasonal position. So we are requesting it to be a full-time position, and we are extremely grateful for this. We did apply for grant funding in the meanwhile to help with the gap funding between now and that 2027 long legislative session for the seasonal education coordinator to continue full-time throughout the year, but we do not yet know if we will be successful. That grant opportunity is coming up in just a couple of weeks for final submission. After this meeting, we're going to celebrate the completion of our grant entrance project, which you all saw our new sign and navigated how to get in here. The entrance is different. This procurement, acquisition, and construction, NOAA funded project improved the visitor center entrance, network infrastructure, and parking expansion. The total approved budget was $1,621,516. The Friends of South Slough provided a cash match in the amount of $216,892. As well as providing funding for up to 20% of our project manager, Julianne Rubel's salary, while she worked tirelessly on this project for the last 6 months. Match for this project also included $478,043 in state funds, and we definitely could not have done this project without Ross's support and without Julianne's hard work. We have a lot of partners to thank: our IT folks at DSL for all of their assistance, our procurement folks and Salem, real property folks at Bend, our neighbors, the Lee family, and of course, Slough Construction and many more. So hopefully you all will stick around after this meeting so we can celebrate accordingly. We'll start at 1. And that is all I have, please.
Excellent, thank you. Any questions from board members? Okay. Thank you. We are moving on to the fee schedule next. So you're back up and want to walk us through that.
Okay. Becca had a family emergency today, so she is out, so I will be presenting on the fee schedule. So we always, in our rules, we have to have a biannual review of the fee schedule that is for money that we taken for the auditorium rental of this space, as well as Spruce Ranch. Spruce Ranch includes the main house itself, as well as the yurts. And I guess camping, although I don't, because I've been there on the call, anyone actually setting up a tent there. So the fee schedule was reviewed in March of 2024. And in short, well, you can see the current rates listed in your packet. So it's $25 a night for both the house and the yurt, $250 a month. The camping is $15 a night. Like I said, I don't think that's the most popular option, probably due to the weather here. But we have, this is again, not the main purpose of this is not to generate revenue. It is to really provide housing for visiting researchers, our interns, and other folks who have a hard time finding housing that is extremely limited in South Coast that might be doing work affiliated with either the Oregon Institute of Marine Biology, our local sister agencies, or of course directly with South Slough. Income generated by Spruce Ranch was $2,350. You can see what the utility costs are. So there was a loss. We also had AmeriCorps, which has always been really important to provide housing for that AmeriCorps volunteer, which typically stayed for 11 months at a time. That AmeriCorps program, unfortunately, is discontinued now due to the federal administration. We still have visiting researchers and DSL staff, and of course our interns. So the recommendation, you can see on the next page what others in the area might charge for their rooms and services. And of course, there might be some differences. There's meals included. One thing we always get asked about is a washer and dryer, which Spruce Ranch does not have. Internet, which Spruce Ranch also did not have, but now does have internet. So basically, we were not going to recommend an increase in the rates for Spruce Ranch, mostly just because the facilities are pretty basic and the internet is pretty recent. It was brought into this project at the front entrance. So that hasn't really been realized, that new service hasn't really been realized yet. The auditorium statistics is $100 for up to 4 hours and $150 for up to 8 hours. We don't rent it that often, mostly because we use it so very often for all our summer camp programming, formal and informal meetings, and so on. But we did generate $500 in this last year. So we also have, and we just try to make it available for all of our collaborators, basically our other sister agencies and other partnership folks that we work with. So we are total, and then you can see our education program fees and miscellaneous donations that we received. The total program fees came in at, that's the teachers on the estuary program, and then our camp fees, our camp, summer camp, and spring break camp are always extremely popular and are always full. So those education fees did come in over almost $17,000. So currently we are recommending no change in the fee schedule, but we are making sure that we need to cover our basic costs for all of our workshops and for our work going forward. We know that the budget set for fiscal year 26 is just about $50,000 more than it was last year. It does not keep up with inflation whatsoever. It does not keep up with cost of living increases or salaries or any of the costs of just basic equipment. So we know that we do need to recover costs. We just don't think it's in this realm of the way to do it through Spruce Ranch and the auditorium. We don't think increasing the cost for these services at these facilities is going to really make up that difference. What we see really being able to further look at is creating, making sure that our fees for our workshops are always reasonable, and might need to increase slightly for our training and engagement workshops, maybe for other programming, and we always still have a question of, and are working towards, researching more about a regional drone service or some sort of collaborative effort towards that, but not really through renting the auditorium, which we use all the time, and through providing this housing, because we just don't see that as filling that gap. It'll actually create more of a need in the bigger gap, and we think it will also hurt the reserve by limiting researchers that already have a hard time coming to our remote area. So we don't want to discourage anyone from coming to South Slough and working with our research team. So we would add in our teachers as well. So we would like to see the rates stay the same. So that's the recommendation from management. Those reasons.
Thank you. Anybody have, what I'd like to do is take a motion on this item and then open it up for discussion.
Probably accept the new rate bill, the rate bill, the old rate.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Maya. Okay, let's open it up for discussion then.
One thing I was thinking about, is maybe, and I get that we don't want to discourage them from coming, but because we're subsidizing for, to refresh, having an internal and external fee. To think about that a little bit for those folks that, maybe aren't involved directly with the program that's here, but just getting here. And that's something that I've seen other groups do, but it is a pretty small number of external folks that is listed there, so it really won't make a huge difference. But it was something I was thinking about in the measuring this part of your explanation.
Thanks for that. And for some folks that stay directly, I think they do pay a small different fee if they're directly related to South Slough versus not directly related to any of our research. I think there's a slight consumer fee. I'll have to follow up on that. But usually handles the spruce ranch fees.
Patricia, is there any advertisements and outreach for folks to Simon's point of how would we make it available to external folks? How would it's even available to them?
Just like most things South Slough and most things, actually not South Slough specific, most things South Coast, it is really kind of word of mouth and everybody knows everybody. So if we get a request from somebody, it might be even somebody from the Oregon Institute of Marine Biology saying, hey, our dorms are full, that somebody is a visiting researcher that needs a place to stay. And it'll oftentimes in the email chain include, hey, this person already moved up and I have a vacation rental that it's already booked this weekend. So I have so-and-so already. It is very communal down here and somewhat informal. So usually it is word of mouth. We could change that though. I mean, we could do an event, right? We do have ways of, we could change that. The board would make that recommendation.
And again, on the line of getting more people understand who we are and where we are. We have this advertisement for the music festival, and I think it would be interesting if we would reach out to some of these people and think about having a concert in here at some time during that. If they would pay the fee, and we do that kind of stuff, but more importantly, we get a lot of people who come into our area because of this music festival to understand what we have out there and what's going on. So encourage us to have conversations with people who have intimate knowledge of this group as well. And I think there are other opportunities when that could work. It does cost us money because we are not usually open at that in the evenings, but I think we could work that out. And I think it would be an amazing way for people to understand what exists out there.
I just had a question. I think that's a great idea about the music festival. It's such a beautiful space in here anyway. But the question I had was, is there really capacity as far as for branching out? I assume that you want to keep it reserved for interns, people that are going to be intimate with the South Slough or close by. And so I wonder if there is really enough space to advertise more times a year, if that would really just encourage people to ask for something that is. So you have an idea of what kind of demand is already.
Sean is here, and if I can respond to that real quick. This year is always a competing resource and a question. Each year we get, so folks are lining up, education and science folks across the board are lining up for interviewing their interns, and there's a variety of different intern programs. Some of them have different start dates when they start to interview, but typically they're going to happen in the fall. And then those interns then will start usually around May or June. Some might come a little bit earlier. And then their program depends on how many weeks, but let's just say through August. Some are shorter than that. But sometimes they don't know exactly how many interns are going to actually get, depending on the program, because the intern can select which reserve they want to go to, depending on the program type. So we're not sure if we're going to be selected or not, or if we get to pick the intern, oftentimes. So sometimes there's a little bit of uncertainty there. So we want to keep those, we want to be as competitive as possible for those spaces. So each year it comes to management of how are we going to prioritize Spruce Ranch? Are we going to prioritize basically leaving almost like a hold for the entire summer and not rent it if we get requests from somebody else that might be working for ODF&W? Or are we going to prioritize first come, first served? And then if we get an intern that comes later or a visiting researcher, we just say, sorry, you weren't, we got your request later in the queue. So this is each year, Rebecca and I always have a discussion about it. This past year, even though we understand that we didn't actually know what our budget was going to be yet, we had not received one from NOAA. The question did come again, what we're going to actually, which way we were going to go, and I made a decision that we were going to hold and keep it for visiting researchers and interns and really prioritize our science team here. So again, I looked at the factors that I considered or what's been the demand in previous years. So I looked at how many people actually came to visit and needed Spruce Ranch from visiting researchers, and then how much revenue did we really get from those other one-off folks like from ODF&W and other sister agencies, and how many of those folks that came to visit that may have spent money at Spruce Ranch for a nominal fee were actually PSL staff, because some of them come down from Salem and they get per diem and they can stay at one of our other locations, such as like Gateway Inn or some of the other locations in the area. And based off of the nominal fee that we have been receiving from those, I just decided that it was more important to prioritize visiting researchers. And at that, Sean, did you want to come over and speak?
And just a clarification to that, so we sometimes waive the fees too for interns and for researchers that are doing projects that fit within our priorities. So we use it as a way to bring researchers and students here, and we offer them lower fees because they're doing work that we want to see done.
Thank you, that makes sense. I know you were always happy to work about prioritization, you were spending some money super busy and not knowing exactly how much people are doing it, so I see you so.
On a different note, and it goes more like with the music festival thing, I was asked just recently by a couple that were looking for a place to get married, and they will always come up there and they love it. Do you rent this place out or something like that? Because they pay good money for that kind of stuff in a day.
Yes, we do. The good note is, and we have hosted graduation parties. We had one just a few weeks ago from high school. We also hosted a couple of different weddings. Since I've been here, just in the 2 years I've been here, the hiccup is there is no alcohol allowed because it is on state facilities. So sometimes that is a hiccup for folks. And you have to carry out all of your own trash, and we have hours of operation. So sometimes people want to run it in the evening and you cannot. So our hours are from 10 to 4. And you can maybe allow an early check-in, but there is no late check-out. So sometimes it's just the hours of operation, but otherwise, sometimes we've had people will post their name. We've also had ceremonies of life, remembrances of life ceremonies here. So oftentimes what people will do is have their main gathering inside visiting hours here, and then they'll pack up all their trash and everything at 4, and then they'll go hit trails with their favorite spot and continue on in their celebration. Thank you. And that's just the auditorium rental.
Yeah, one last. Because it's really only during time of operation, is it possible to have a schedule where they pay for people to come in and open it up in the evening? And, okay, because I was just gonna say, sometimes it's a nice extra money for our staff if they want to come in and do some of that, and an hourly rate that we could charge them. But I know it's not in the schedule. But it's-
I don't think so. We are represented, all of our staff are represented except for management, and we have staff that already work either a Monday through Friday schedule or a Tuesday through Saturday schedule, so it's already a little bit complicated. So I don't think it would probably allow that, the collective bargaining unit, all of their flex hours with field work, thinking about their odd hours based on title, times of going out at 8 o'clock at night and so forth. And then the education staff with their programming and community programming. I honestly don't think it would work and it would be worth it. So, and we always have to have 2 people here for safety reasons in the building. So getting 2 people here, I don't think that would be worth it. Laura? Any input?
I'm going to have to pass on this one. I can barely hear anybody, and some I can't hear at all. So I apologize for that, but I don't know what to do about it. So I'm not even sure what the topic is.
We're talking about, the rental rates for Spruce Ranch and the auditorium to establish the fee schedule. I apologize, we'll have to look into figuring out a more conducive way of improving our sound quality from them. Thank you. Okay, are we ready to take a vote then? We have a motion and a second on the table. All those in favor of keeping the rate as is? Any opposed? Hearing none, the fee schedule is passed. Next up, we have, Dr. Yates on the invasive species action plan. If you heard about, she introduced this at the last meeting, and I believe we now have an actual draft to review. Very like.
Let's see, people hear me, I know that sounds like online, I'm becoming hungry, so guys. All right, so I first of all wanted to thank you for looking at the invasive species plan and whatever you were able to get to that before this meeting. It is very valuable to like send something off that you know is not perfect and because we're looking for feedback. So I appreciate that was the intent of it, was to actually get some feedback before it was finished so that we could incorporate that into the actual plan rather than being like, here's the final product, you're like, I really wanted something else in there, or my vision was different, or there could have been more information on this. And so I just wanted to that was quite so I wanted to start with that. And then I also just wanted to, we talked a lot last time about it, I gave a long presentation that I think was a little maybe too in-depth, but wanted to remind you the intent of the plan and the audience as well before we started the discussion. So the intent of the plan, of which we sort of outlined, was really to be kind of a one document that puts this information that has never been in one place before at research. And then for it to be useful for staff, for actually implementing and managing invasive species at the reserve. And then we also, the audience, so staff was a big part of that in the audience, but also commission, the tribes, members of the public feel like the way that we manage invasive species at the reserve is in a really informed and intentional way. And we're minimizing negative impacts, and we're considering the potential of different perspectives and uses of the reserve as well. So that's kind of where we were coming from in terms of the intention of it. So you are free to give me as much or as little feedback as you want. Anything that you want to specifically just follow up with, feel free to just send me whatever notes you have. But we're here to kind of talk about anything you want to talk about in terms of that sort of incorporated. We've already had some really excellent feedback from Team Stephanie and our friends group, as well as the South Coast CWMA partners. So I've already received a lot of really good feedback that's going to go to the next version. So I appreciate that. So I'll just go for that. Any questions for these?
This is amazing work. Thank you so much. I had a couple of suggestions around adding definitions possibly, depending on our audience. So thank you for telling me about that. Even at the very beginning, we just talked about lands in kind of a generic sense. And I was wondering, I mean, we talked about it, or you talked about it throughout the document, to include waterways and shorelines and those kind of things. And so one thought was to have in your definitions, define what you are saying when you talk about lands, just to make that more clear. And along those same lines, right at the beginning, maybe make it more clear that an invasive species includes both flora and fauna. So those are just my two things that I was kind of going through. And it's very clear if you read the entire document, but if you're just looking at the beginning, that's two things that I was looking for. Thank you. Thank you. That's great.
And the intention here, just for the commission members, is that in our statutes, the commission is required to vote on invasive species treatment, which can be really problematic given the frequency of what you need and the narrow windows it takes to treat these. So the goal here, what I'd like to achieve is creating a pathway to approve a plan, an invasive species management plan that gives staff the flexibility and the flexibility and ability to treat these species because we've approved the plan, which meets the statutory requirements, that gives staff the ability to move forward with their work without needing to come to the commission every time they need to eradicate these species.
Yeah, so specifically on page 24 is when we looked at as well, so an approval and decision-making process. So that is slightly different. So in the past, every time we wanted to or needed to, would either use a herbicide to apply to invasive species management, as Caitlin has said, we need to wait months on end to the commission. And so we were sort of hoping with this decision-making flow diagram, we can sort of show the intentionality of the decision-making process.
I think that's a great idea, actually, and having a plan to wait, but as I look at the last few days, I love pictures, by the way, thank you very much. Most of these are in my own yard, and I do recognize that the video was something that we had to vote on in order for you to actually work that the. So, no, good idea.
That was very well done. I missed the last 4 meetings. I didn't see the presentation, but it was very thorough. And so able to grasp. I guess what I gathered from it was how much work it will take, how many different ones there are, how varied it is your management approach to something that are very we have to think about when you're addressing, lifestyle of that. And thinking about that, it just seems like a lot of work, and not just much work, but also work that will have to just continue and be managed over time. And so I guess when I need questions and looking at the beginning, the kind of the required resources and stuff in a research area is how much
what kind of funding, executive funds and staff go into the stewardship part, or if you need it to kind of do this and maintain it over time. I know the staff like Saturday stewardship, and it looks like there's a lot of collaboration for going to as well, we work on it, but I was just curious what, you know, if there's enough for it, so that you can answer and what your staff that it do stuff.
Sure, that is a fantastic question. There is, besides Saturday stewards, there is a small allocation in the operations award each fiscal year for the stewardship program, that can go towards invasive species management, but it will in no way be able to handle, the amount of work that this ongoing work takes, and Alice is one person, as we all know, so it does have the help of some interns, of course, throughout the year and different things, but this is not, you know, this is only one part of the job of the stewardship coordinator. So realistically, that's really where a lot of, we made sure to put that in to this flow diagram on page 24 is, you know, do we have the resources? That's specifically put into, okay, the third gray box down says the stewardship coordinator is going to review everything and the feasibility of the costs and resources complete, and then we'll give it to the reserve manager to approve. So even if the reserve manager thinks that this is the strategy to go forward, we might not have the budget or the means to do it. We might not have a grant opportunity to do it. Currently, I don't think it's on any of our maintenance staff appetite to acquire their pesticide application license. So any spray application so far to date that has been done, which has been extremely limited. It's been limited. We've just did anybody in course in the past at one location. Has always been contracted out with our friends at Coos Watershed Association, and we were able to find funding for that. But that's been very one-off and very specific. So if, depending on what species it is and how far ranging it is throughout the reserve, it's really going to be a case by case if we have the funding available. But overall, it's a fantastic question, and also why it's very early in the decision-making process on whether or not we're going to be able to even, which strategy we're going to be able to implement.
And I was asked, as you mentioned, grants. So there are invasive species grants available, but often these take a lot of time, so if you're trying to respond really quickly, that's a challenge. And they're also not only the general maintenance of invasive species, that's what I'm saying, it's the landowner's responsibility, and the grants are more for those really high impact ag-related needs and stuff like that. So it can be challenging to get any grants. We were lucky enough with the loss and restoration project, we incorporated invasive species management into that. So we've had some funds to do the work, which has been really good. Yeah, and so I think there is a real, you know, capacity kind of issue here of funding. Patricia said, yeah, we've got funds in the operations, but that funding has actually been cut out of the last couple of operations and was because of, you know, reduced funding and stuff like that. So, and being able to respond quickly is really the challenge, because if you see something popping up, coming in new, so important to get in there. So it'd be great to have mechanisms to do that. Other follow. Yeah, I guess I just figure out, so none of the like maintenance staff or anything will have it incorporated in that, and they just accept steward, so steward. I guess that's not really a grant, but thank you for my question. Thanks, Jennifer.
Just wondering, so me and my staff all have our herbicide applicator's license. Is that something, just a small spot we could do for you guys?
We are always open to new partnerships and agreements, and I can absolutely work on something that does not have to be extremely complicated. We were able, so Lance, that would be lovely. Yes, we actually have a template that we used for Coos Watershed Association that I think we could not recreate political, and let's talk about it. Thank you. I will remember that. Judy, did you get that in the meeting notes? You got it in the minutes? Okay, make sure the record has that down.
On that note, Alex, what is the timeline for having us vote on this and then having, I think for the purposes of meeting the ORS is making sure that we have a cadence of bringing it back to the commission for review and oversight and that adaptive management component that you built into this, understanding what are the resources you have to think about supporting this work.
Well, Tricia can remind me what the next meeting time is, just so that I think we are hoping to get it. Ready. Yes, great questions, everyone. So I think our next meeting is actually not over, if I recall. So what we wanted to do is, the last meeting was like a teaser to present the topic and get everyone thinking about it and what the major, it's not that this work hasn't been going, but again, to talk about, this is an internal document that we'll be using. It's not going to be static. We don't want it to sit on an electronic shelf somewhere on the computer. We'll be using it, updating it accordingly along with the maps. So but we wanted to go ahead and make sure that this process change of not coming to management commission, but building in a layer of decision-making power within the reserve staff and management itself, and then that accountability factor within the reserve manager was also noted in here, and transparency for documentation and record keeping. And then we were going to, at this meeting, have discussion, collect all the comments and feedback from, we were hoping in the next month, really, so that by the October meeting, we could, between now and then, we could have those conversations for clarification while we implement those comments, make sure we get back to any questions and feedback, and then have the full plan presented in the October meeting. So it would be in your packet, and that would be an action item, would be asking for adoption. Because this is also part of DSL's overall strategic plan, is to have this invasive species plan adopted in this biennium. Alice also has the fire management plan, which she's also been working on very steadily at the same time. That's also a management plan. And so I think so basically we wanted to get this one adopted first, and then right after that, we'll be presenting a fire management plan to the commission, following the same sort of process steps of a teaser, talking to you all about it, presenting it, getting comments and feedback, and then finally bringing the plan to a future 2027 meeting for adoption to meet the DSL strategic plan by the spring of 2027. Does that help?
Yeah, and one thing I'd like to add as well is that there's other people that are reviewing it, not just the commission, so the community as well as the tribes. And so I'll be incorporating all of that feedback.
So we already have a plan. It doesn't include a lot of the stuff that's in this plan. Is it, this next 2 or 3 months before October is probably the worst time for invasive species coming at us. Is it worthwhile to make a motion today to accept page 24, basically that process, and implement it with respect to our old plan, with an understanding that the new plan will include it? I don't know that, I just wanted to know that, because I've done that in other places where we thought it was important to get it going.
So, do you need a commission vote on any invasive species management plan between now and the end of the year?
I think in terms of co-design, which is what we really come to the commission for, we don't have anything planned until October. So in terms of funding the actual capacity, we get it on the ground. So I like your suggestion.
Yeah. Yes, I see Laura.
I just wanted, Alice, I want to thank you so much. That's such a great amount of work that you put together for us to peruse, and I was very pleased to see it. I know that a few years back it took, I don't know, a year and a half to go through the process that was there then to try to get a handle on bitty bitty, and if you can't wait on on huge commissions like this to do things that are really really necessary. And I like the format that you put this in, and the basic responsibility, while the commissions mostly falls on the director, manager. I'm sorry, I forgot your real title there, Patricia. But um, uh, you know, being able for us to see what you're doing, what you're planning to do, how you arrive at your decision making, and then tackling it while it's important to do so. I think it's a wonderful document. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
I would like to echo that. Thank you, Laura. And I also love the idea of putting the decision making and the people who have the expertise and know the resources really well. This commission, although we are very well educated and highly intelligent people, are not on the ground and don't have the experience, with the exception of Lance, who has 0% license. So I really like this approach. My only request is that in the decision-making process or somewhere in this document, for the commission, again, to retain our oversight and work on the adaptive management is to have you come with a biannual, so every other year. So if we adopt this in October, you put it into effect in 27. So let's say every odd number year, so in 2029, come back to the commission with report out. I think that instead of having it annually, because there's not a lot that you can get to report out on an annual basis, except for a couple of treatments. The biannual might give us enough information to be able to adjust as you might need in some of this.
Yeah, that sounds great. So we do incorporate in our, science and stewardship reporting metrics and things like that. So you definitely be able to keep up to date with seeing what's happening in the invasive species world. I think as Patricia said as well, living document, if we're, making additions or changes or anything, not to that decision-making process, but, updated best management practices that we want to include, that would be a great thing to sort of roll out.
So, thank you.
Yeah, I was just gonna build on that and say, if you brought it back, to review, we'd also have an opportunity for the public to make comments, and just keep things, updated, not only to let us know what's going on, but to make sure that we review the plan and that we have to do that. Periodically, whatever that seems to make sense, whether it's every year or every 5 years, but some way for the community to engage as well.
That was one thing that, when Alice and I were discussing this, we wanted to make sure that there was transparency. While we don't get a lot of public comment and feedback typically at these meetings, we wanted to make sure that there was a process laid out so that there would be, an opportunity to receive the public comment and to make sure that we have that transparency built in. Because right now, there's just a blanket where people just know anywhere they go, we don't ever spray anything ever. And so now, if there is a change in that, we want to make sure that people will be informed that we really are reaching out and that people know that there could be a change in the future. So, and that, would be very pointed, but to also understand why. And we just want to make sure that the staff also have the tools to be able to communicate that if they get a question. So thank you for that. So.
Other discussion items? Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Reeves. This was really well done. Thank you. See, our next agenda item. Oh, it's a presentation from Dave Pearson, who is online. Dave, are you able to hear us? Excellent.
Yeah, I can hear you guys.
Excellent.
So I can share my screen for my presentation. This is my thesis that I did in South Slough. And it's about fish diversity and change over time. Okay, so this is my thesis titled Shifting Schools for 4 Decades of Fish Biodiversity Change in South Slough Estuary in Oregon, USA. So what is an estuary, which I'm sure that you all know? But an estuary is a partially enclosed body of water formed where rivers meet the oceans, and they're influenced by tides, and they allow for a wide range of habitat conditions in one area. And the four sites that I sampled at and that all of the previous fish survey sampled at are Yonker Point, Volino Island, Winchester North, and Sangstacken. And these were chosen because of the different habitat types in the estuary that they represent. Volino Island and Yonker Point were sampled 2 days per month for the sampling period at both low and high tides, and they represent low tide channel habitats, so they stay connected to deeper water during low tide. And then Winchester North and Sangstacken were sampled only 1 day a month during the sampling period at high tide only, and they represent marsh upper flat habitats and only have water in them during high tide. So the first staining survey was done in 1987, and it helped standardize the methods that we used, which I'll talk about later in the presentation, and it provided a strong historical baseline of data for future comparison. And there was a pretty big gap between the first survey and the second survey, and during that, there was a marine heat wave known as the blob that left temperatures in the estuary unusually high for over 100 days. And this also caused a loss of eelgrass, which is an important nursery habitat for a lot of juvenile fishes in the estuary. And eelgrass is also vulnerable because of the invasive green crab, um, which is pretty destructive to eelgrass. And then this also came with a sharp decline in productivity in the estuary. And then the second staining survey happened from 2015 to 2018, and it helped quantify some of this declining productivity, but it only used data from 2016 and 2017 for comparison because there were some concerns since the sampling periods weren't the same in every year. Um, and then that brings us to 2025, where I did the third staining survey from June to October, going out 3 days a month at those four sites that I talked about before. And I will comparing my data with all of the previous data, including the previously not compared data in the second survey, and water quality metrics. And the reason I'm using all of the data, even though there were those concerns for bias, is because I was able to use CPUE to scale the data to this sampling effort, and I'll explain what CPUE is later on. So this work is relevant because the commercial fishing industry in Oregon brings in $42 million a year, according to ODFW, as well as creates around 9,000 jobs. And estuaries are home to several important culture or commercially important fish species, specifically like salmon. And then a lot of these fish, salmon in particular, are important to different indigenous groups in the region. And then contribution to long-term data sets and furthering research is important to inform future restoration efforts. And this brings us to my two research questions, which were, how have fish assemblage, abundance, and community structure in South Slough changed over time? And how do these patterns correspond with environmental variability as a potential contextual influence on what is observed? So starting with the sampling methods, a team of volunteers and I and Sean would load the seine net onto the boat, and the seine net we used was made to the same specifications as the seine net in the previous surveys. So it was 38 meters long, and it had a lead line at the bottom and a buoy line at the top, letting it sit like a curtain in the water so we could scoop up the fish. And it has a purse in the middle of a finer mesh where the fish would collect. And we would take the net out, and 2 to 3 volunteers would get out with one end of the net, while another volunteer and I and Sean would boat it around in kind of a half circle shape. And the other volunteer and I would release the net, making sure that the lead line stayed down, and that it was not getting tangled. And then we would get out on the other side and pull it in, making sure to keep the lead line on the bottom the whole time, and ensuring that the purse stayed out in the middle. And then we would pull the net up onto shore and collect the fish. And this picture here shows an example of a seine haul. So that green mesh there is the purse, and the black mesh is what the rest of the net was made out of. And as you can see, we got a lot of things besides fish in the net sometimes. So I circled where some of the fish are. And so we would parse out the fish from the net and put them into buckets with estuarine water and aerators to best like mimic their normal conditions while they were waiting to get identified and measured. And then we would put any green crabs we found in this jar called crab jail, and Sean would take them and dispose of them. And so I would take the fish out of the bucket and identify them. And in case I wasn't sure of the identification, I would take a picture and go compare it to different reference materials at OIMB just to make sure I was 100% confident in the identification, because that's one of the most important parts. And this here is just a highlight reel of some of my favorite fish that we caught. Um, and then once the fish was identified, I would take it and I would measure it using what we called the fish ruler, but it's essentially just a piece of PVC pipe cut in half with a measuring tape laid down in it. And then another volunteer would weigh the fish. And then we would place them into a bucket again. And then we would have other volunteers recording the metadata of the site and the fish and the data about the fish down on waterproof paper. And we would also have a volunteer making sure they were all safely released. And for the first 30 species that we would find during a specific sampling event, those were all measured and weighed. But if we got more than 30, we would just use the average of the biomass data to talk about that, to get the weight for and length for them, because there were times where we would catch like 2,000 fish in one sampling event, and it's just really not logistical to measure and weigh all of those. So this is a summary of all of the sampling events for all of the different years. And I just want to draw everyone's attention to how different the months that were sampled and the number of seines per year were, which is why I used CPUE to scale the results to the sampling effort. So CPUE is catch per unit effort. So each seine was given a unique ID number, 1 through 458. And I have an example there of a seine that I did in July. And each species was counted per seine. And then the CPUE of each species per year was totaled and then divided by the number of seines in that year. So for example, the CPUE of surf smelt in 2025, we took the total of surf smelt from that year, which was 2,758, divided by the total seines in 2025, which was 30. And that gives us our CPUE of 91.93. So this is a breakdown of how I'm going to present my results. I'm going to start with species abundance for all the sampling efforts, and that's going to be the only result that is presented in raw abundance, and I'll explain why when we get to it. And then top 10 species CPUE composition over time, interannual variation, CPUE composition of 3 key ecological groups: forage fish, salmonids, and benthic fish. And then I'll talk about the biomass data, mean abundance change over time, and then temperature. So this is that first result, species abundance, and this is the total abundance for all of the sampling events combined. And I wanted to include this to highlight that just a few species make up a large part of total abundance. And so we decided to just focus on a small number of species and the other results. So starting with the top 10 species CPUE over time, the first thing I want to talk about is that in that first table we looked at, you might have noticed that there was the most abundance in 1987, but I just wanted to say that this is the CPUE, so that scaled number of just the top 10 most abundant species. So that's why 1987 is not as high as 2025, even though it was the most abundant year. And then I want to talk about first the decline from 1987 to 2015, which seems to be a decline in Pacific staghorn sculpin and shiner perch seems to be responsible for the majority of that decline. And then from 2017 to 2018, that's also another pretty noticeable decline, but that's characterized more as a decline of all of those species rather than just a couple. And then within these top 10 species, we're just going to focus on some, starting with the Chinook salmon, which was present in every sampling year except for 2025. And even though it did experience declines, it was consistently present in every year besides 2025. And then Pacific staghorn sculpin is also present in every sampling year and had a big decline from 1987 to 2015, and then from 2017 to 2018, and hasn't quite recovered back to the numbers we were seeing before in 2025. And then Shiner Perch had the highest CPUE in 1987, but by the time we get to 2025, we caught exactly seven. And this is a picture here of one of the seven that we caught. And then surf smelt has kind of the opposite pattern of Shiner Perch, where it was much lower in 1987 and then had the highest CPUE in 2025 and was also the biggest fish we caught in 2025. And that's a picture of him there, the biggest fish. And then we have top smelt, which is pretty consistent from 1987 to 2015, increasing a bit in 2016, and then um, decreasing from 2017 to 2018 before being the second highest CPUE in 2025. And then here is the numerical values of those CPUEs as well as the standard deviation, which can speak to interannual variation. So starting with surf smelt and top smelt, they had the highest standard deviation, which makes sense with that big increase we saw in 2025. As you can see with the numbers in 2025, they're all noticeably higher than all of the CPUEs in the previous years. And then next we have Shiner Perch, which again makes sense with that graph we saw. It has kind of the opposite pattern with the CPUE of 30 in 1987 and then 0.23 in 2025. And then finally, we have Pacific Staghorn Sculpin and Chinook salmon. Pacific Staghorn Sculpin has a lower standard deviation, which makes sense to me based on that graph because we saw that even though it did have that decline from 1987 to 2015, the numbers after that are much more consistent and closer to each other. And then for Chinook salmon, it has the lowest standard deviation, even though it completely disappeared by 2025. But as you can see, it never had a CPUE that exceeded 2. So even though it was completely gone by 2025, it was pretty consistently low in all of the other years. This brings us to our first key ecological group, which are forage fish. And this includes fish with schooling fish with pretty small lifespans. And they're also called bait fish. And the specific forage fish we're going to highlight are Shiner Perch, which was proportionally the biggest contributor to CPUE of forage fish in 1987, but like I said, had almost completely disappeared by 2025. And then we have surf smelt, which was by far the biggest contributor to CPUE of this key ecological group in 2025, but was far lower of a proportion in the previous years. And then we have top smelt, which is pretty consistent as far as how much it contributed to this key ecological group in the previous sampling years before increasing a lot in 2025. And our next key ecological group is salmonids. And this graph to me is interesting because clearly the biggest contributor to the salmonids in all previous years was the Chinook salmon. But like we said, we didn't have any in 2025. And this is a picture I got of a coho salmon, just so that there's an example of what a salmonid is. And then finally, we have benthic fish, which are fish that are kind of like to hang out towards the bottom and are pretty sensitive to their specific habitats. And Pacific Staghorn Sculpin is consistently the biggest contributor to the proportion of CPUE for this key ecological group in all of the years. Even though it did decline some proportionally, it stayed pretty similar. And then this is my biomass data, and these are not the same 10 species we've been focusing on throughout the rest of this presentation. These are actually the only species that showed any change in biomass at all. But I also did not have access to the biomass data from the survey years in the 2010s. So this is just changes between 1987 and 2025. And I initially wanted to look at biomass data because I thought it could serve as a health indicator for like presumably as fish are getting healthier, they're getting bigger and larger. But I don't think that this is maybe as good of a health indicator as I previously thought, since so few species showed any change. And of the species we've been talking about, the ones that did show changes were Pacific Staghorn Sculpin that got bigger and heavier, surf smelt, which got bigger but lighter, and top smelt, which got smaller but heavier. Um, and then we have this graph, which is change over time. And so it shows the mean total abundance compared across the different months. And so 1987 by far has the highest abundance as well as seemingly the most seasonal variation. And then followed by 2025, which follows a similar pattern and is noticeably higher than the years in the 2010s, which are lower but seem to be more consistent. And this graph tells me that maybe as there's higher abundance, there seems to be more seasonal variation. And then finally, we have temperature. So I did look at other water quality metrics like dissolved oxygen and salinity and turbidity, but within the estuary, but those showed very little change. And then I was only looking at those water quality metrics during my survey. And so instead, I decided to look at an offshore NOAA buoy off of Crescent City, California, starting in 1985 and going through 2025. And I highlighted each of the sampling periods. And then this middle rectangle here, that's the darkest, is where the second survey and the blob overlap. And so in this graph, there's obviously a lot of interannual variation of temperature. It fluctuates a lot throughout the years, but there is the highest spike happened during the blob in this sampling period. So overall patterns in fish communities, 1987, we saw the highest abundance and it created a good baseline. And then the years in the 2010s were lower but stable. And then 2025 represents a bit of a new shift and some restructuring. And this is characterized by strong interannual variations in CPUE, a clear separation between time periods, community structure dominated by just a few species, as well as long-term restructuring. And then talking about potential drivers of fish community change, I reviewed some previous literature to look at what might be causing the changes we're seeing. So starting with temperature variability, which is exactly what it sounds like, it's changes in water temperature, and that can influence fish physiology, metabolism, migration, growth, and survival, and different species have different thermal tolerances. And an example of temperature variability is the blob, and it had, like I mentioned before, prolonged periods of unusually high temperature, with elevated water temperature of at least 1.5 degrees Celsius higher than normal for over 100 days in South Slough, and it may have affected habitat quality, species distribution, and food web dynamics. And the next, recruitment variability. Recruitment is defined as the successful survival of juvenile fish into the population. And many estuarine species are already known to have large fluctuations in recruitment variability. And species with shorter lifespans, like the forage fish we talked about, are particularly sensitive. And next we have habitat conditions. And habitat conditions strongly influences feeding location, reproduction location, and predator refuge. And like we talked about before, eelgrass is an important habitat within South Slough for these fish. And then finally, we have productivity changes, which is the amount of biological energy in an ecosystem. And that can be impacted by nutrients, temperature levels, oxygen levels, and ocean conditions. Next, I'm going to talk about why species might respond differently. So, life history of different fish can control response timing. So, starting with the quickest response we see is with forage fish. Like I said, they have a lower lifespan and are considered rapid environmental responders. And so they showed those responses pretty quickly, like we saw with the shiner perch and the surf and the top smelt. And then next we have benthic fish, which have a much wider range of lifespans, but are very sensitive to their local habitat. So as that habitat changes, that's what they're going to respond to. And then finally we have salmonids, which had the slowest response, because they are anadromous, meaning that they start in freshwater before moving out into the open ocean and then come back to freshwater to spawn. And eventually die. They might not be experiencing changes as quickly as the other fish. And this could be an explanation for why the Chinook salmon was pretty consistent even with the years during the blob before showing their decline much later. So the role of temperature and water quality, like we saw, temperature did have high interannual variation and can be potentially linked to community and abundance shifts, but within the scope of my study, I can't do any significance testing to prove this for sure. And then other water quality metrics showed minimal variation across years. And so overall in the estuary, there's a theme of resilience and restructuring. There was a dominance change over time between shiner perch and surf smelt, and then Pacific staghorn sculpin really highlights this resilience being consistently present in all sampling years. And then we see this restructuring, like I mentioned, with shiner perch versus surf smelt. And then finally, like any study, there are some limitations. So because this study didn't have any true replication because it was only done in one estuary, I'm not able to do any significance testing. So while I can highlight the CPUE and abundance trends, shifts in composition and community structure, I can I have less confidence on the temperature associations, recruitment variation, and seasonal observations, but a lot of that can be supported with previous literature. However, I cannot confirm causation or other confounding factors because of the lack of replication and potential sampling bias effects. So in conclusion, temperature could be a potential driver of change, but that can't be confirmed within the scope of this study. And based on previous literature, change could be caused by life history and habitat conditions. And then we can see that fish communities show a strong temporal restructuring based on the patterns in the data. And then finally, the estuary system as a whole shows resilience with ongoing change. And then I wanted to acknowledge my primary thesis advisors, which were Peter Marco at the OIMB and Sean Schooler at South Slough, and my honors college representative, Jean Fay. And then I had a lot of volunteers, some through South Slough and some through the community. And then I had a lot of student volunteers that are listed here. And then I have my references and then any questions that y'all might have.
Okay. Great, very well done. Open up the for the mission.
So, I know it wasn't on your study, but is there any relationship to, is it just the amount of eelgrass that you looked at and the decline, or are there different species of eelgrass that have taken over, like the fish have changed? Any ideas on that?
When I was doing the previous literature on eelgrass, I was just looking at like eelgrass coverage and the decline in that. I didn't look at the different species of eelgrass.
Oh.
Jay, did you look at variability between your four sites? Did you have any notable changes there? Everything you presented was accumulated across the estuary. I was just curious if there was variability between the sites.
Yeah, I did look at variability between the sites, but there was like barely any difference between them, except for that the sites that were sampled more at both high and low tide had more fish, and the data contributed to them, but that can be explained by just them being sampled more often than the other sites. Whenever I like scaled it down to try to like truly compare between the sites, there was like little to no variation between them.
Hi Jay, similar to Cinnamon's question, I was wondering if you looked at monthly CPUE. Seems like lumping by the same year, when some years they were just doing summer months, and some years they were doing all year round, and some years they were doing April and the summer months. There's a lot of seasonality in the estuary, and you mentioned, indigenous fish that are only coming in to spawn, or like smolts are using the estuary for a brief month or two to become more robust before they head out to sea, for example, or herring when they come in for a couple of weeks to spawn. So I'm thinking that if you're looking at community structure and abundance patterns, that some of that might be explained by the monthly differences.
Yeah, I did look at that some. The only months that were consistently sampled were July and October between all of the sampling years. So I did compare those, and those were the months with like the greatest variation, which I guess makes sense because they were the only months consistently sampled. But when I talked to Sean about it, we thought that it was better like not to include like the monthly variation just because it was so different between all of the years.
Jake, you said that biomass was not as insightful as you originally thought it might be. Did you look at the relationship between biomass and CPUE to see if there was any density effects on biomass?
I did not look at the relationship between biomass and CPUE just because the species that I showed were the only species that had any change in biomass. And I think if I had been able to access the biomass data from the 2010s, it might have been a little bit different and we might have seen changes with more species, but I just didn't feel like I had enough biomass data to be able to make that comparison.
Great. Thank you so much for this great presentation and congratulations on that.
Thank you.
I also want to thank Sean for serving as an advisor on this project and for other students as well. And I guess we're on go some from really great to have an on-site advisor like that. I do want to go back to Dr. Reed's the invasive species management plan and just ask commission members to provide any comments by the end of this month to keep that on track. Correct, mention that. We wrap up that item. Thank you. Okay, and then we have another facility report. Patricia, I'm wondering if it's time we could take a break, or how long do you think the facility? Okay, do folks want to take a 5-minute break? Stretch your legs? Okay. Laura, we're taking a 5-minute break. We're gonna be back in 5 minutes. That's what I'm. Yeah, it's not here today, go back and do it. Are you recovered? But you sure?
Okay, so
Yeah, how are you doing?
that's really bad. You said don't do but
That's my leg, okay.
But months. I told you, about 6 months now, that's,
Okay, I have a lot of lots of comments.
you're not this serious, that's what you said. That's it, but also, it's covered the last month of the shop. Months ago.
Yeah.
So,
I would do it.
yeah, I don't. Yes, the shop better than the alternative.
So you've done, are you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They're doing probably
Yeah, you can, even if they got one for us. Yeah. It was great. Yeah.
Yeah, that's all.
Yeah. Here. Good job. Yeah.
And even if it didn't happen, and we know that, it's still personality.
There's so many times for us to do something here.
Oh, it's
I remember something that it.
Yeah, they got
It's okay. And I know they use the OSP. Absolutely. This is a beautiful.
Right now.
I've seen somebody. If I didn't have to like, then you get caught up in a little more strong. They pick up all the ground. Getting people to talk to you, you know, hard to say. Getting kids, we should be drinking. Run by. That's all. They're gonna come back. Thank you all. We start our maintenance session. Okay, our first information report is administration of facilities. Ooh, sorry, let me talk into this. I'm sorry. We'll try to remember, Laura, about that we have to kiss the microphone so you can hear us. I assume because you're back to that, you're gonna take that first.
Yep, I will. Thank you. So on behalf of facilities and administration, we have two staffing updates. One is, I believe I announced this, I think we announced this at the last meeting, but if not, even if we did, further ado, congratulations to Deborah Rudd. She has been with South Slough for a very long time. Not sure exactly how many years, 18, 19, somewhere in that range. But we did an internal recruitment, and Deb was a successful candidate, who's now the training and engagement outreach specialist. So we are still in the process of transitioning Deb fully into her new position from the public outreach coordinator, and it was her public involvement coordinator. And her position her existing position has not been backfilled or advertised as of yet, because again, we do not have an operations award at this meeting. And the other update is our longtime facilities lead, Mike Noonan, has given his notice that he'll be leaving at the end of September. So we are working on an recruitment process for that, and we do want to make sure that we have overlap, because Mike has been here for close to 11 years and has a lot of knowledge of all of our system and processes of the facilities will be sorely missed. Nothing here is quite straightforward, and we have a lot of facilities to take care of: Spruce Ranch, our maintenance shop, here at the visitor center, and of course all of our trails. So we just you'll be sorely missed. So staff will going to continue to work on the trail system and facilities, doing routine maintenance. And we have a lot of help from Shutter Creek staff, other TSL staff helping out in the interim. Your packet has the state budget reports for the 2025 to 2027 biennium through April 2026. And I've already mentioned that we were able to go ahead and get in our operations grant award on June 9th, and the amount of funding that's been provided so far. And we have submitted the required progress reports on multiple federal grants for all the usual timelines. Those progress reports are due every 6 months and at the end of a grant for closeout. Currently, we are working on a procurement, acquisition, and construction grant, which has not yet been announced. That's also been delayed, just like our operations award. But we are waiting to hopefully have that come out in the next few weeks. The anticipated date for that award itself would be early 2027. So for us, we are looking at a replacement of the solar system and a completely new roof that has definitely been needed. I've been hearing about the roof needs for almost the entire time I have worked at DSO, which is going on 12 years. And we are also looking at trying to redo the siding on part of the visitor center for fire protection, going something like hardy boards that would be more durable for fire resistance. And we are now the evacuation center here at the visitor center for the OIMD staff and the Charleston Marine Life Center. So the faculty that are there, as well as any of the students and any members of the public at the Charleston Marine Life Center, as well as our own science staff that are down at the Ecos area, would all be making their way up here in the event of a tsunami or other catastrophe. So we want to make sure that if we have a disaster, we are well prepared. So we contracted with HGE Design to assist in our options to see for, like, we have Connex boxes. How much supplies do we need? How much solar backup do we need for how many days to assist this many people, so on and so forth. So we are in the midst of getting our pricing and all of our options for that grant application. So that is our big anticipated grant package. PAC is going to be fairly small. It has not been officially, like I said, announced yet, but they anticipate $8 million for all reserves. So keep in mind, there's 30 current, there will be 32 by the end of this year. So depending on when it gets announced, amongst all of them, that's extremely competitive. So more to come on that. Our initial budget from HGE Design came back as excess of, I think, $3 million. So we definitely went back to the drawing board and we're having to rethink some things on our original ideas because that's not going to be very competitive for the overall $8 million PAC award. For land acquisition grants, we've got several that are still ongoing. We've got the Deal Triangle and Winchester acquisitions. We do have a draft potential sales agreement into the county attorney, Coos County attorney for the Deal Triangle. We are waiting on comments and revisions back from that and remain optimistic and I'm hopeful that we can come to an agreement on the Deal Triangle land acquisition. It's been a little tricky. The Winchester 80-acre property is a common school farm property managed by the Department of Forestry. So that one is going to be transferred to us for conservation. And that was recently approved by the land board. The Deal Triangle property is that 113-acre property owned by Coos County Forestry managed for timber harvest. That was just a little bit more complicated because there's several structures on it that are dilapidated and need removal from the site, which also has some access issues getting in there. And our Lee land trade has a lot to do with our front entrance project. So years ago, prior to my time, there was a critical issue where we had part of our property actually on the Lee's property, our neighbors next door, Devil's Pallet, and part of their property on ours with that main driveway. That was our existing path that came down. We wanted to redo our front entrance so that we could increase sight lines and safety, security, increase overflow parking in general, parking for buses and RVs, and have new lighting in the pedestrian walkways as well as just general for your cars at night. We're going to be getting a new gate as well. So and of course hardwired internet. So there was a lot of different goals that we had in the front entrance project. And one of them, which is just foundational, is to clear up the land transaction mishaps of encroachment. So we needed to do a land swap with the Lee family next door. And it would ultimately be a win-win for both of us because they wanted to be able to get their semis that pull in for their business off of the main road, and they can use our existing driveway. And then they built a new shop, and then those trucks can safely get off Seven Devils Road and service their business. And then meanwhile, we could acquire their property and add a turn lane, a left-hand turn lane, so that you can safely come into the reserve. And then we could have that offshoot that you probably noticed this morning for the buses and RVs. So overall, it would be a win-win. But there's a lot of paperwork involved and a lot of property line adjustments. I think 3 in total at the end of the day. A lot of surveys and appraisals. So I just really think the Lee family, the goal is to have equal value and to have a win-win. But we've been working on this since, I think I got a call from Mr. Lee the day after I started. That was in March of 2024. We are setting our goals that, just had a birthday, but by my next birthday for sure, we're going to be done. So, because we both just had one, but it's really, really close. But hopefully by September, actually, we'll be able to have that completely done. We just received our driveway permit sign off last week, and so that's why you all have been able to drive on it. Started yesterday, so that was really exciting. And again, just want to thank Bob for all of their support. So, and let me see, last but not least, we've got Cheryl Peters of Oregon has been helping a lot of our maintenance crew as well as some Shutter Creek crews been also helping out on a new trail that has yet to be named, but we're working with our travel partners on a naming for it. It's going to be a new trail that goes from the lower parking lot off of Finch that will ultimately go down to the existing, Lawson Trail that will take you to the new boardwalk. And you can, link up to a larger loop, to make a bigger loop by the Frederickson Trail. So, the idea is probably next spring, we'll have a big ribbon cutting, so we have to, use those big scissors. Today will be the second time we'll be using those big old scissors. Jamie used them at our exhibit hall opening a couple years ago, so that'll be like the third time we'll be using big scissors. But I imagine we'll be, doing a big grand opening of the boardwalk, the trail, and then the interpretive garden, really to celebrate the completion of such a massive, project in Blossom, which is $3.5 million. But in the meanwhile, that trail is expected to be, open probably in August. The boardwalk is open, currently. We're just not necessarily promoting and advertising it a whole lot. We'll just have a big ceremony, in the spring. And I think with that, that is the end of the report. I'll take any questions anyone has any.
I don't have any questions. I have two additional pieces of information. From the standalone side of DSL, we are, fortunately, the state is in, not fortunately, the state is in a tight budget season. But fortunately for DSL, we're not in a budget cutting, but we're in a sort of stable, no growth scenario. So we weren't able to add any new positions really, but we were able to, we want to focus on protecting and keeping the people that we do have. Two of those people are here at Slough, and we presented our budget, our agency requested budget to the land board back in, June, sorry. And Juliana's position, project management position, which is a BIL, a grant funded position, we are including that in the budget to be permanently funded as a DSL position. And the seasonal educator Sherry's position, making that a permanent full-time position as well. And the land board supported this position, and so those will be moving forward in our ARB. There's still a lot of, Arnie knows, a lot of steps in the process. But wanted to just assure everybody that we are taking a really important step in protecting the staff that we do have down here at the South Living. And then the other piece on the lineup on. Oh, I lost it. Yes, Arnie.
I'll give you the one that the.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to, congratulate you on retirement, because that was moving. For many years, I thought he was gonna stay and work only at OAMB, because he was there for a long time. Some of those original buildings down there, he was part of instrumental in getting that to happen. And he was a student at Mercer High School, graduated with my daughter, so it's nice to see him having the opportunity to go on and do some other things. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Would I give a quick thank you just on that particular report for letting out on the staff and students that we here. We did have one in December, and we really appreciated being able to come to a higher spot at our initial muster point. So we are working on our cash and stuff too. The South Sea staff had a equals really valuable stuff for immediate, but even the higher at site, it was the big one. But great, so thank you so much, and thanks for writing there. That's actually, thank you for jogging my memory. That was the additional detail I wanted to share is, we are working with the state and OEM to help build out this facility. The state itself is looking at what they're calling islands during major disasters. The South Coast is considered an island. Originally, we thought that the state was looking at different facilities of where they could serve more of the community. So we brought them out here, and the Shutter Creek, it turns out the LA State Forest headquarters is going to be potentially a major evacuation site, and potentially with facilities for field hospitals. We're looking at
even teleports to be able to evacuate people and children working with the school district. They came out here thinking that this would be sort of a temporary evacuation, and then we would be moving people to more permanent places. But once they got here and sort of back then for the facility, they really think this is going to be a major site for potential evacuation and disaster service during an emergency for the entire community areas, especially south of Seven Devils. And so we are hopefully going to be bringing a lot of state resources over the years into helping to support South Slough as a community evacuation site. So more on that to come, but it was a really, really great field visit with the state staff and the backup.
So I want to note that, my son-in-law is a geomorphologist, and one of his more exciting places was to come visit here, because of subduction earthquakes and sand dunes, which he did a bunch of his work in his doctorate thesis on. South Slough has a unique space for those geologists because it shows a 10 or 12-foot drop, and it raised in this area. So within the reserve, there are places that the last subduction earthquake made amazingly major changes in the landform. So I appreciate that it's a site. Getting here may not be as easy as it looks. The road that goes between here and Charleston may not be the way. You may have to walk a long ways to get here, but I think it's the right thing to do. And I've always thought the high school is one of the places they think of as a site in the city. And yet most of the geology people say the high school may come right down the hill in a big landslide. So it's really, we are in a unique place. So be appreciative that we're not having earthquakes right now. And when the one comes, it's going to be, it'll change a lot of things, so we have no idea what it's gonna change. So just be prepared. And be prepared to figure out what you're gonna do after you see what's happening.
Always have a plan.
Always have multiple plans.
And what I appreciate about what you just said is by identifying this site too, it will prioritize some of the other state investments like transportation on key access and evacuation routes. So hopefully that'll help secure this as an accessible facility.
Yeah, and it also, I would assume they will bring a container out there with the stuff you want in it.
Yes,
And
that's
they have,
the Conex boxes. We're working on those actually right now. That'll be the first thing to do. Excellent, thank you. Patricia?
And I forgot to mention, speaking of making a trek, or accessibility, we were able to, write into our operations award, all things considering, hopefully it comes through in October, that we are going to update our trails plan. The trails plan for South Slough has not, been updated since the late 80s, early 90s. So there's a lot of maintenance needs, a lot of work on the trails, accessibility issues and different things. So we are going to be taking a look at that, and it's just extremely outdated. So we are going to be working on that in the next 2 years, and that is on one of our big buckets to do. So more to come on that. So just want to make sure I got that mentioned.
Thank you. Okay, next up, our education report. Jamie, are you starting on that? Go on. All right, so I don't have much, I don't have any big changes to announce, just a really busy season for education this time of year. So since our last commission report, we've just been doing school field trips, visiting schools, after school program, teacher workshops, community events, outreach events. I think it's all in your packet. And I don't think I have anything else that I was gonna say. I was gonna mention that we are a 3-person team for the moment because Deborah is in her position, but other than that, no major changes for us. And where's the slow today? Actually, I think it's really fun. I do check it all the time. I didn't look today, but yesterday, our boat and the boat from Marshfield are traveling together, like back across the Pacific in our direction. And they're both like, you know, like they're hanging out together in a little. Excellent. Thank you. Any questions? Okay. Thank you. Next up, we have. What's it? That for the training and engagement.
Sure.
So as Jamie alluded to, I recently switched positions from public involvement coordinator as part of the education team to the training engagement coordinator, formerly known as the coastal training program. And I've been getting my feet wet kind of in this position and still wrapping up some things with my old position since May 1st officially. And I'm excited. I've gotten to know some of our NOAA partners. I'm going to the coastal training meeting in November and get to meet everyone in person. We've already had an online meetings. I got to do an online version of the coastal planners meeting, so that really gave me really good insight of what a lot of these people who have to make decisions every day deal with. And so that was really helpful and insightful to help me see what needs and trainings we might be able to provide. I've been working closely with Sean on the commercialization of the green crabs, so there may be some avenues there. And as we were just talking about, disaster preparedness and resiliency, there's definitely a lot of need for training and engagement in that realm, as well as with invasive species and climate change initiatives. So I'm really excited. I was just telling one of the members of our science team, I'm excited because I always read about all the science stuff and I only am peripherally involved or have to send a volunteer with my former position. But with this new position, I get to actively engage with a lot of these projects. So I'm excited, and hopefully by the next commission meeting, I'll have a little bit more to report for you.
Thank you. Any comments, questions from staff? Great. Next, we have the science and stewardship. Sean?
Sure. All right, good morning, everyone. So I thought that I would talk a little bit about some of the visiting researchers that we're getting. That a number of researchers wanting to work here, and one of the goals of the reserve system is to bring in researchers to do work in these tidal systems. Just a rundown of a few. We're talking about the Cascadia subduction zone. We have one group of researchers, Dr. Tina Dura and Dr. David Bruce from Virginia Tech. They're going to be taking what's called paleoseismology, which is a new thing for me, but they take like a core, they look at a soil core, and they can divide that soil core up and look at the organisms in it, like diatoms, so things you might see in different layers of soil. So they can actually look at the fire, earthquakes, and tsunamis using these soil cores and looking at the diatoms in those and figure out when they occurred and what happened during those. And so they're coming in September, and you're going to take some cores and bring a class of students out as well. 12 students are going to learn how to do these techniques, and they can look back at the past 4,000 years, they think, in these subductions of earthquakes, tsunamis, using this technique. That'll be interesting. Erica Fontanez is a master's student in California Botanic Garden and Claremont Graduate University. She's going to be looking at a species, a sensitive species we have in our tidal marshes called birdsbeak. So we have one species here that's endangered at the state level, and then California has several species, one of which is endangered at the federal level. So these are sensitive species endangered. She's going to come in and take some samples to do a phylogenetic analysis to see how they're all related, and try to better understand this complex system of several interrelated species of this sensitive marsh plant. So she'll be coming just the next couple weeks to do that. Dr. Lillian Aoki is someone who worked with for quite a long time at the University of Oregon. She's actually working on several projects. One is on eelgrass, looking at drones, aerial remote imagery to detect eelgrass, also linking that to habitats, and also another project looking at eDNA to detect what fish species are using those as eelgrass. But she's also interested in this greenhouse gas emission, so she may realize she was part of our the greenhouse gas flux system we have. She also has several graduate students. One is just currently getting a permit to look at biochar. So she can put biochar in some of these wetlands and see how biochar affects greenhouse gas emissions. So is this something we can use in restoration maybe to reduce methane production? And so she's going to be working in our wetlands, installing these devices, where she can then measure the amount of methane and carbon dioxide production with different levels of biochar and different salinity levels that also affects greenhouse gas production. So she's working with Dr. Lillian Oki as well as Christine Bernabe, who's looking at gas flux across the salt marsh elevation gradients, looking at one of our older sites, Boone's Marsh, that has different levels of restoration, different elevations. And so she's looking to see again how greenhouse gases are produced over marsh restoration. We're also doing the same thing in our marsh at Boston, or a very similar thing, with two researchers, Chris Janicek and Trevor Williams, who are with Oregon State University. So a lot of work going on with climate change, greenhouse gas production, Cascadia subduction zones, endangered plants. We had also Dr. Dan Taylor from Brigham Young University in Idaho. He was interested in doing some work looking at the effects of forest restoration on insect communities using light traps. And also Dr. Eric Gilman, also from the same institution, a professor there, is looking at using some of our estuary fish in their teaching collection. So he teaches a fish class and wants to collect some of our fish here, preserve and then use them in his classes. So I think that's a pretty good overview of some of the research we have coming in. And back to the accommodation too, they often use our spruce branch and are very, it helps them a lot with their finances because a lot of them don't have much money to do this research. So a lot of them might just be doing this as cheaply as possible, and we can really help with that, and it helps to draw researchers and graduate students in. All right, I'll take any questions.
Yeah, I just wondered what clearly technology, what sites are they using? I remember meeting a couple of people over like cores at the end of Tom Street back in '91.
Well, I think there's a different group, but they're going to be going way over what's called Talbot Slough. They identified a particular site that they think is the best one. It's going to be kind of hard to get to, so we got to figure out how to get there in a good tide. But it's on the same stacking side with the other side. And they have a particular spot that they think is the best.
Also, one of your things was doing for tidal studies. I'm not sure, there were a couple of people, I think from Oregon State, who were doing some project in 1989, having to meet them on setting up the tide gauge, I think, for a bridge, doing the thing, and trying to correlate what data we use.
Oh, I don't know that study. We have been working on a lot of different things. We can talk about different projects if you want, but yeah. Other questions? All right, thanks.
Okay. All right, so as usual, everything's in your package that we're kind of working on in the stewardship world. Again, wanted to give you some updates on where we're at with the Blossom Creek Restoration Project. So the sort of three sections, I guess, so forestry, we are so close. Juliana's getting us across the finish line here with our last 2 units. And if you're going down to Hitch Road, it's going to be very obvious about what's going on down there. And so that's finishing up over the next month or so, which is very exciting. And then down in the lowlands, so the wetland area, you'll recall, was implemented in 2024. So I wanted to highlight the monitoring that's been going on down there. So Jenny Schmidt is our fearless leader in terms of monitoring effectiveness of our restoration projects here. And I just want to give her a big shout out because it has been absolutely incredible, the coordination that she does with this. So just some of the things that she's been leading is vegetation monitoring, temperature in streams and soil and groundwater, groundwater levels, stream flow velocity, stream macroinvertebrate sedimentation, lamprey, and so much more out there. And so this summer we've had teams of like 9 people out there, and they're all going in different directions, and Jenny's got plans for all of them, and all the plans like fall apart in the first hour, and then she revisits it and like fixes everything. And we had 6 out of the 9 people get allergies from grass pollen on that further side. So it's been really, an immense effort to get the monitoring data. And what we're hearing from a lot of our coastal partners is that that data is just so important because there's a lot of these, assumptions or observations in restoration projects that there's not a lot of data out there monitoring. So we've been collecting post-restoration data for the last 2 years, and we're getting into analysing, writing up and presenting that, which is really exciting. And then the final thing is cultural garden, working with our tribal partners to get the site prepped this summer so that we can start planting. November 7th, I think, is our first sort of post-stewardship planting date. So Laura Beth Barton came out for one of our prep days, and the community just had an amazing time. Laura Beth shared stories of her ancestors in the valley and welcomed us to the place, and people really felt connected with the area and really passionate at the work that we're doing down there. I really appreciate that. So very excited about that part of the project. Any questions?
Any questions? Laura, Beth?
I'm busy reading my captions to make sure I'm following everybody. What is it you'd like me to do?
I was wondering if you had any questions for Darby.
Oh, I don't have any questions. The morning and afternoon I spent down there helping get that area ready was a great experience for me, and I really appreciated being invited to participate in it. So I thank you for that too, Alice.
Excellent. Okay. Finance budget.
It is in your packet provided by Rebecca, and I guess I would say if you have, I'm not going to go through it. I don't believe that she usually does in these meetings, but if you have any questions, then please just let me know and I'll follow up directly.
Okay. Any questions? Great. Then I think Christine, as a South Slough, is our last.
The South Slough report is in your book. We're just excited today for the ribbon cutting, and so we're here for that. And then Jeannie has been taking the lead in finding us a part-time employee for the bookstore that can help facilitate the front desk here too. So it's a work in progress, and we had our first interview, we'll have another one this afternoon. So we'll hopefully get moved on that. Now that we've finished with this project, we have another project. So anyway, I appreciate working with you all. It's a pleasure to always be here and be part of this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you to Fox for again meeting this afternoon. It's ribbon cutting possible. Okay. I believe that concludes all the items. Our next meeting is October 7th. Yes.
So I don't know if you're aware of it, OSU geology as the earthquake fault straight top from the field property over there. And they're coming in a month, dig that trench out, we dug it up in the 90s, we gotta dig it, it's one of the snake lines or incline, if you look what it is. So you're probably be welcome to go visit it from there, and that kind of relates to everything else you were just talking about.
I didn't catch the first part.
Oh, the OSU geology professors and students, they're gonna dig a trench over across from the Deal property, there's a earthquake fault over there.
I didn't
And I think they're digging it down maybe 30 feet this time. So it might be the rest of them, take a look at that.
Okay. Could you share the contact information so that we can coordinate when they're going to be out there and make sure we.
Yeah, I'll send you that stuff.
Excellent, thank you, thanks.
Jenny should have a team.
Yeah.
Yes.
A couple of things, just as I mentioned, first, that's one of my other hats on the school board at Tuesday. It came up in graduation ceremonies at our alternative school destinations, how important the kids felt coming out here and being a part of some of the project was to them. And so it was repeatedly mentioned by kids as well as the people, the staff there, that that relationship has been really helpful. If you haven't, been to the state capitol recently, it's worth a visit. There are a number of large boulders that were set around the front entrance with quotes from each of the 9 tribes in Oregon. We have, in the whole restoration project, a lot of stuff was put into reconnecting with our local tribes. And you will notice the basket weaving is etched in all the new stairs that go down to the basement. All of the outside areas where you can go and visit have bronze paddles from the different paddle shapes of tribes around Oregon. So there's a lot more interesting things to see that will continue as they redo the flags of the United States. Right now, they're having a conversation whether they're going to put the 9 tribes within that same circle. That's the expectation. They'll all be there together. So there's a lot of interesting things happening at the state capitol. We haven't done that before. Let me see one other thing. Oh, every time I come out here, I'm reminded that one of our local kids, Bud Walsh, not much of a kid. His dad started the bank funding. He was the person that did it. But Bud was a young attorney who went into the Carter administration and had the opportunity to work on making the first federal escrow reserve at South Slough. So he, whenever I see him, my son was hired by his firm one time in San Francisco. He talks about how important that was from his perspective as a young lawyer to get to work in Washington, D.C. to provide for the estuary that's here in Tuesday. And it's really kind of interesting how the connections back to this place from all over are pretty remarkable and amazing. I just like to mention that one up here. That is pretty much everything that I want to say. I just wanted to say thanks to South Slough for making the opportunity for kids to see themselves in a different way. And many of the kids in our home schools did not have the best feeling about who they were in the community. And this makes them feel like they are part of the community, that they made a difference in something that was important to them. So I just have to mention that. Thank you.
Love that. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, honey. Anyone else? Additional updates? Can I just say something? Of course.
For the Friends of the South Slough, I went to the Seven Devils Brewery when we had their really want beer. Yeah, the South Slough there's stiff ale, and I just want to say it was delicious. So thank you.
Cool. One more thing that came up this last that I was excited about. I was watching Omaha's Wild Kingdom on TV about a month ago, and who was the prime deal? But Cocoa Tribe and their restoration project down in Bandon for salmon. And it was fun to see a lot of local people on national TV program talking about the restoration and saving our salmon. So thanks.
Beautiful. Thank you. Okay, that concludes our agenda. We will adjourn the meeting today and see everyone on October 7th. Thank you. It's gonna be just outside. First, we had the plan and deal. So, I'm not even forgetting. I look very much. Okay, so you guys want to have it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I'll bring a copy of it. I'll change it. Okay.